तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविविरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. The nectar of thy words revives the scorched spirit of human beings. They purify the sinner and are the life of the holy. To hear them itself is auspicious and peace-generating. They are the real givers who spread thy name far and wide. Welcome to the Friday scripture class, and today's scripture is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is that thing which purifies us, because we are not totally free from the defects. So here sinner is that word, the word kalmasha, the defects, the impurity that we have in the mind. So it purifies all our impurities and defects in us. And also it is very joyful and peace generating, auspicious too. So the words of Sri Ramakrishna, listening to them and reading them is in fact being with Sri Ramakrishna. So today's page is 346 and chapter is With the Devotees at Dakshineswar Part 2, entry dated Monday, December 17, 1883. M was staying with the Master, with Sri Ramakrishna for a few days, and from morning till evening he was with Sri Ramakrishna. That's why we get a lot of conversation with different devotees and Sri Ramakrishna's lifestyle, everything. M has seen that, and he records everything. What was he doing in the morning, what he did in the afternoon, like that he's saying, giving time. If he had to come from Calcutta to Dakshineswar, it will be mostly on the weekends, and also it will be in the afternoon or noon time. But because he is staying in Dakshineswar, so we can see Sri Ramakrishna's activity since very morning. Now let us go to what is there. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning. Sri Ramakrishna was in his room with M when Dr. Madhu arrived and sat down beside the Master on the small couch. He was an elderly man and full of wit. He used to visit the Master when the latter felt indisposed. Dr. Madhu was very... Sri Ramakrishna loved him, he liked him. He was a senior person, and he often used to ask Madhu to sit on his the smaller bed where he used to sit and talk. The little taller bed of Sri Ramakrishna where he used to rest at night, just beside that, it was adjacent to his sleeping bed was his sitting bed. That is written here as couch. And it was just a bed with a mat on it, and Sri Ramakrishna used to sit there and talk to the devotees. So he used to love this Dr. Madhu, and often used to ask him to sit on that couch, on that smaller bed where he himself is sitting. He used to ask him. So today also he asked Madhu to sit with him, and that honor he used to give to Dr. Madhu. Master. The whole thing in a nutshell is that one must develop ecstatic love for Satchidananda. What kind of love? How should one love God? So now he said the first ecstatic love. Now he said what kind of that love is? How will we know what is that ecstatic love? So now he's going to explain what kind of love has to be developed for God. Not just repeating name and trying to think of him for some time and forgetting him the whole day. That is not only not ecstatic, but that is not love, has it grown at all. So just we try to put our mind, force it to put on God, but we love other things of the world more, where our mind naturally flows. Mind goes to the objects of the world, which we see, find and think that are more joyful. And because we have heard that God is the real joy, all is flittering and not real thing, that's why we want to put the mind in God, intellectually knowing that God is the source of all joy. Joy in others is not the real joy, it's fleeting joy. But the joy of God is the real joy. We have heard it, but we have not realized. So we have to force our mind to put on God. And that's why this japam thing, and that's why thinking of God, trying to meditate, mind doesn't stay there. Why doesn't mind stay in our Ishta when we do try to do meditation? Because our love has not risen to such a state where there is natural pull of God for our mind. So mind is not purified enough. It is yet to be purified by one of the purification is reading and listening to the words of God, to the scriptures, to the holy books. And others are the japam, repeating the name of God and meditating on God. So that is the way mind will be gradually purified, and will be able to, the more mind is purified, more it gets attracted towards God. So more it becomes easier for the devotee to meditate on God, to think of God. And it is not only easier, but the devotee gets more joy, a greater and greater degree of joy on thinking about God. And Sri Ramakrishna said that is not enough, even that natural little attraction is not enough. And he said there should be ecstatic love of God. Only one will realize God with that ecstatic love. Now he said ecstatic love. But Sri Ramakrishna is such a great teacher. Now he wants to explain what is ecstatic love by giving the examples of what type of love is that. The whole thing in a nutshell is that one must develop ecstatic love for Satchidananda. Satchidananda is God. Any God in any form or God without form, all Satchidananda. Here he replaces the word Satchidananda, uses the word Satchidananda. What kind of love? How should one love God? Gauri used to say that one must become like Sita. Gauri is the Gauri Pandit of Indes or Ides. So the Gauri Pandit was very expert. He was almost leader of all the scriptural knowledge, and also through his study of scripture had grown love for God. And he had not so much about studied about what is real love for God, and he used to practice also. So he was advanced in his spiritual practice and also scriptural knowledge. So this is Gauri Pandit, who was Sri Ramakrishna time one of the leaders of Hindu faith in Bengal. So the Gauri Pandit used to say that one must become like Sita to understand Rama, like Bhagavati, the Divine Mother, to understand Bhagavan, Shiva. One must practice austerity, and as Bhagavati did, in order to attain Shiva. One must cultivate the attitude of Prakriti in order to realize Purusha, the attitude of a friend, a husband, or a mother. So these last three are in the Vaishnava literature is there about the 5 kinds of relationship with God. To realize God, one should develop one of the 5 kinds. The 3 are these. And friend, handmaid, or a mother. Now this handmaid Madhura Bhava, you can say about Rama. He gives one example of Sita. One should become Sita to understand Rama, to have love for Rama, to get Rama. So Sita's love for Rama was so much for God. Now it was important for even for Rama to get Sita. So if we can become like Sita in our love for God, so we will try to go to God, but God will also try to come to us. So that is the love of Sita for Rama. Now he will describe that. What kind of love Sita had for Rama, how it is so special. Like in our times, Mirabai's love, in our times means more medieval. So Mirabai's love for Krishna. Here, or you can say from the Vaishnava Shastra about Radhika's love for Krishna, it's the same thing. But Sri Ramakrishna gives an example of Sita's love for Rama. He gives another example, the Bhagavati or Parvati's love, Sati's love for Shiva. The Parvati's love for Shiva. Then Sri Ramakrishna says it's just love by saying I love you doesn't make love. One has to take austerity. One has to take all the trouble to reach the beloved. So when you love someone, want to get something, someone. So in fact that type of love is like the one that when he wants to study and get degree, wants to achieve something in the world. All there is that love is there. Love for position, love for degree, love for money. Only when you have that type of love, you try to get that. And to have that love or will to acquire that, you have to do a lot of austerities. Those who become great possessors in the world of name, fame, money, they have to do lot of austerity. They have to exclude everything from their life and focus is on how to achieve the thing that I want. For that many obstacles come, many trouble come, many allurement come, all are driven off and the focus is maintained by renouncing everything, and that is the austerity. So how Parvati did prayer for Shiva to attain Shiva. That type of austerity, that is austerity is a one-pointed love. Tapas, it is called tapas in Sanskrit, austerity. Tapas means focus, concentration, exclusion of every other thought, one-pointed thought. That is the tapas. So in tapas, if your mind wants to, if you are already purified mind, tapas is easier. You will think of nothing. If your mind is not purified and yet you want something, then you have to give up the desire. Little may come, mind is not purified, it is frittered mind, it is attached to many objects. All from those the mind has to be withdrawn. No, not this, I don't want that, I don't want that, I want this. And when you do that, then only you want the objects of the world. Success in exam, name in your office work, or your research work, you get something in the research work. There is so much austerity is needed. And when you want God, you have to totally bring your mind fully on God. And that mind which will receive God, only it doesn't happen only focusing with some tremendous desire to become, like you want to do research, want to get Nobel Prize. More than that, you give up any other desire and desire only to attain God. Why God? When you say, why to pass exam? There is some other goal is there. If I pass the exam, I will get a good job. But in attaining God, there is no other intention. Why you want to love God? Why you want to realize God? No other reason. I want to realize God because God realization is the goal of life. Not after that, anything after that. So our Narada also says, the attainment of God is the final thing. Love of God is the final thing. Nothing more needed. That I will love God, then I will get that. There is no I will get that after that. Love of God is the ultimate thing. So here Sri Ramakrishna says about the need to practice austerity. Austerity is the focus on God and with the exclusion of others. And that the more we are doing spiritual practice, more we get attracted and attached to God. And gives the example of Sita, we'll describe later on, and also Parvati, the Bhagavati for Bhagavan Shiva. So one must cultivate the attitude of Prakriti in order to realize Purusha. He become more abstract here and gives the example of Prakriti and Purusha. So Prakriti and Purusha is like the idea of Sakara Brahma, Saguna Brahma and the Prakriti that all around. One must the attitude of Prakriti in order to realize Purusha. Now Prakriti is said to be like it's insentient as we see the nature, but nature itself is not insentient. It is a manifestation, you can say, the water, the stones and the mountains may be insentient. But the Prakriti from which all this come is sentient like we are. So that is also has become conscious by the power of the pure consciousness. So that is the Mula Prakriti. If the Prakriti was without any consciousness, how would she create so much? So, but Prakriti's consciousness, according to Advaita, is not her own consciousness, but it is the consciousness borrowed from the Purusha. Purusha alone is the source of consciousness. He is the consciousness and he is the source of everything that we find conscious in the universe. So, Prakriti knows that her existence depends on Purusha. Without Purusha, Prakriti is nothing. There is no Prakriti, there is no existence at all. So, like that, Sri Ramakrishna says, one should cultivate the attitude of Prakriti in order to realize Purusha. Prakriti knows that all the creation that she does is from the consciousness borrowed, by the power of consciousness borrowed from Purusha. And she is the one who works. Purusha, as if it doesn't work, it doesn't take part in activity. But without Purusha, Prakriti is functionless. It cannot work anything without Purusha. So, Prakriti is that attitude, that my everything depends, my all actions depend on Purusha. Like that we have to be, to think about the consciousness of, that we are working everything, that I achieve this, I do this. So all that my doing is not my doing, but it is all given by God. God is the ultimate source of my action and my existence. Without God, neither I exist nor I can act or think. It is all God providing. That is the dependence of Prakriti on the Purusha, dependence of the Jiva on the Atman or the Self or the Paramatman. Self is dependent on Paramatman for everything. Whatever the Jiva or the human being, individual person attains in life is not his attainment or her attainment. It is the attainment by the power of God. That's what the attitude of Prakriti to Purusha will be that. Lord, you are the doer, I am not the doer. Tomar karma tumi karoma loke bole koriyami. People say that you have done so great work, you did so nice work, but the doer who is a devotee knows all this quality is given by God. He has given this, He can take any moment. So there is nothing that you have done. You have done nothing, but God has done through you. So, as the Prakriti is dependent on Purusha for everything, so the human being, individual soul, Jivatma is dependent on Paramatma for all his actions, all his or her glory, all his or her success. All is because of God. So, that person does say that I do nothing. It is Lord, you do everything. So that is the attitude of Prakriti and the Purusha. So that Sri Ramakrishna tries to emphasize. Now, he gave the three examples of Sita's love for Rama, Parvati's love for Shiva, and Prakriti's attitude towards the Purusha. Now, his own experience, he says, I saw Sita in a vision. I found that her entire mind was concentrated on Rama. She was totally indifferent to everything. her hands, her feet, her clothes, her jewels. It seemed that Rama had filled every bit of her life, and she could not remain alive without Rama. You see, this is the ecstatic love we have to have for the sake of God. Nothing we think about. And Sri Ramakrishna saw this in a vision, and she could understand the mind of Sita. She saw Sita, she's talking about the vision, but she saw Sita with his open eyes. He was sitting in Panchavati and Sita came, and Sri Ramakrishna looked at her, and then she recognized who was she, she thought, and then she understood, oh, it is Sita. So then when he understood about the Sita, then Sita merged in the body of Sri Ramakrishna. And he says that I could see the footsteps of Sita there. And I asked Hridaya to offer flowers on the footstep on the mud, on the soft ground near Panchavati. And one monkey came down and touched there. So all these were the proof that he saw Sita. And by seeing Sita, how Sri Ramakrishna's purity of mind, you see. He didn't just see the Sita, how she looked, and how was her smile and all that. But he saw the very mind of the Sita, how focused was she on God. In Ramayana we read that she was always thinking of Rama. Janak Jeevan Rama Nama. That's what we say. The name of Rama is the life of Janaki or Sita. But that Ramanama or Rama himself, name and name, the person denoted by name is same. So that we read in the Ramayana. But here Sri Ramakrishna saw himself how Sita's mind thought of nothing but Rama alone. And this was revealed to Sri Ramakrishna. How we understand by reading Sri Ramakrishna the mind of the Sita. We read in the Ramayana that Sita thought of Rama, for Rama was everything. But we won't understand. Now Sri Ramakrishna will give detail. Sita had no idea, no thought of herself at all, no thought of her body, clothes, feet, limbs, the jewelries. Nothing she thought about what she is wearing, how does she look, nothing. All her mind was in Rama. 100% she was thinking of Rama alone and nothing else. That is ecstatic love. When we have that type of love for God, God realization will happen. So that's what the Sri Ramakrishna said. The whole thing in a nutshell is that one must develop ecstatic love for God, for Satchidananda. This ecstatic is the very important. That ecstatic love is compared with austerity of Parvati. That it's the same thing. Ecstatic love of Sita, austerity of Parvati, it's the same thing. It seemed that Rama had filled every bit of her, you see, every bit of her life, and she could not remain alive without Rama. Very breath was Rama, every thought was Rama for her. So that vision Sri Ramakrishna himself had. What we learn about Sita in the Lanka when she was in the Ashoka grove in Lanka, always she thought of Rama. Hanuman also saw that and could recognize. But Sri Ramakrishna himself had that vision, how Sita was fully engrossed in the thought of Rama. There was no existence of Sita, only there was Rama in her. Every bit of her was full of Rama. Every thought of her was full of Rama. She had no thought other than Rama. Her ego was not there at all, was replaced by Rama alone. That is the love of Sita. When one has that type of love, then only that person can get Rama. So, one has to, that's what he said in the beginning, that one has to have that love of like the Sita. What kind of love? How should one love God? Gauri is to say that one must become like Sita to understand Rama. This understand or love or be engrossed have yearning, it's the same thing. Understand is that. It's not the intellectual understanding, it's much more than intellectual understanding. It is the understanding or longing of the heart. So that all together becomes that ecstatic love for Rama. Every one of us has to be like Rama, like Sita. Then only we'll get Rama. So Rama is that God. So that's big. Sri Ramakrishna gives us that idea that how will we have realized God. Yam says, yes sir, she was mad with love for Rama. So, mad with love. Sri Master, mad. That's the word, exact word that Sri Ramakrishna liked this word, mad for God. Be mad for God. He used to say, people are mad for so many things. Some are mad for name and fame. Some are mad for money. Some are mad for glory. So why don't you become mad for, if everyone is mad, be mad for God, for the best thing, permanent thing, really source of bliss. Be mad for God, and mad, that's the word. And Sri Ramakrishna's favorite song, he used to say, there is one Bengali song, Amay de ma pagol kore, ar kaz nai ma gyan vichare. So I don't want to have knowledge or this vichara, nitya vastu vichara. No, they make me mad in thy love. Oh mother, amay de ma pagal kore. And he used to say, that is my ideal. One has to be mad in love for God. His sadhana in the beginning started from that, his madness for the Divine Mother. So he inspires everyone to be mad for God. It is the highest of the love. When the love grows to that intensity, one becomes like mad for God. So he wants that. When Yam said that she was mad with love for Rama, Sri Ramakrishna says, mad. Yes, that's the word. One must become mad with love in order to realize God. Clearly he says here. Mad. What kind of madness is this? When this madness comes, there is no other thought or other worldly things, etiquette, other what to do and what not to do, what the people will think if I behave that way. All are gone. So only that madness remains, only God remains in your thought. So no consideration for the world and worldly behavior. There is no any external thing that I should behave like that, I cannot do that, what people will think, no, I will not show my ecstasy. Nothing is there when there is real madness comes. So that is what the madness is. Total thought only about God and no thought for world and worldly etiquette. That's the madness for God. But that love is not possible if the mind dwells on woman and gold. Here he comes again. When you have attraction for the world, woman represents the enjoyment of the world, gold represents possession of the worldly things. Nothing of that. If little, even a trace of that, you want to possess something or you want to enjoy something, sense enjoyment, then you cannot realize God. You are not mad for God. But that love is not possible, that maddening love for God is not possible if our mind dwells on woman and gold. This dwelling is different degrees. If it is too much dwells, you will not go towards God at all. If you try to go to God and yet you try to love the world, then it will not fully go to God. You are not mad for God at all. So your madness may be, today you may think of God more, tomorrow for the things of the world more. So you become anxious, you become more frustrated if you don't get the things of the world. One doesn't sit in your meditation, japam doesn't happen good, because it is the vacillating mind from sometimes towards God and sometimes towards Kamini Kanchana. And when the mind is not dwelling there, mind is not attracted, their mind has been completely withdrawn from the objects of the world, and whole mind is put on God. Ananyas chintayanto mam. That's what Sri Krishna said. Ananya chitta, na anya chitta. The chitta is nowhere else, only in God. So that becomes ananya chitta on God. So only then one can realize God. Sex life with a woman, what happens is there in that. The realization of God gives 10 million times more happiness. Gauri is to say that when a man attains ecstatic love of God, all the pores of the skin, even the roots of the hair, become like so many sexual organs, and in every pore the aspirant enjoys the happiness of communion with the Atman. So here Sri Ramakrishna says about that people often, this life of woman, he always used to say about this purity of life in thought, about this thing, and people think that that is enjoyable or something. Sri Ramakrishna said, what is joy in that? In worldly attraction for Kamini concept, there is no joy at all. The real joy in loving God, it is 10 million times more of bliss than in any enjoyment of the senses to the sense object. In any sense and sense object contact, whatever joyful that may be, but it is 10 million times less than your being with God. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna says, quoting Gauri Pandit. He must be telling in from some scriptures that will be like that. So in the scriptures that it is said, to realize God, people sacrifice so much. It says, Edichanto brahmacharyam charanti tatte padam sangrahena pravakshe. So, wishing to realize that, people practice brahmacharya, continence, total continence they practice because they know real joy is in God. What is their joy in the joy of the senses with the sense objects? Sri Ramakrishna says the real joy is in realizing God, in being with God. So in the Gita also it is said, when God is realized, that yastu atma ratireva syat atma triptascha manava atmanyeva cha santusta tasya karyam na vidyate. One becomes free from all desire. No work binds that person. Free from the bondage of work. When we become fully engrossed in the Atman, in God, yastu atma ratireva syat. Rati also means the total absorption, rati. You play Atma Krida, so you become Atma Rati. When one is Atma Rati, Atma Tripta, Atma Santusta, he is fully engrossed, fully satisfied, fully contented in the Atman. Then where is there work for that person? Because no worldly desire is there for that person. So, but everything is consumed. His whole mind, thought, intellect, heart is all consumed in the thought of God. So, Jesus says the same thing. Love God. Love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. That's what Jesus also said. All your heart, all your mind, all your strength. You love God. And that's what total absorption in God. And that is the state of so much of bliss. In Taittiriya Upanishad also, it is described towards the end that bliss of God is so many times much intenser than being the joy of the world. So it describes from the unit of joy if a youthful person, very well educated and well behaved, nothing, he indulged in the worldly vices, and very well behaved, well educated, and performing action well and successful in life, healthy. Such person's joy, human joy, is called one joy. If you call that, it goes from, compares to the joy of Gandharva, Kinnara, Manushya Gandharva, Indra, like that, 100 times more, 100 times more, 100 times more. And then finally says, the joy of realization of Brahman is so many folds more compared to the joyful life in the world. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna also wants to describe them. The joy of God is incomparable to any other joy, any other pleasure in the world. So one should seek that, and he used to give the example of worldly pleasure and the joy of God, and he used to give the common example of the rice is kept in the gunny bags, rats used to eat. Now the owner of the rice granary, what he did is, he could not make it rat proof, so he did one thing. So he put murki, like the puffed paddy mixed with some sweet, and put near the gunny bags where the rice were kept, the rice full of gunny bags. And rats came, before they reached the gunny bags, they got this sweetened puffed rice. And they started eating that. And whole night they used to eat that and never went to the rice grain, to the rice kept in the gunny bags. Otherwise they would eat that. And he says, Sri Ramakrishna says, one volume of rice makes 14 volume of puffed rice. So 14 times it is dilute, it is less in amount. And rats cannot reach that condensed joy, condensed food. And they are happy with this light, diluted food. Similarly, human beings, if we are not aware of this condensed bliss, condensed joy, we may be only engaged in the worldly pleasures, which is so diluted compared to the bliss of God. So he says, remember this, that we have to seek God, be mad for God, don't be mad for money, name and fame, and creature comforts, and the worries for those. Don't be mad for those things. Don't even think about the creature comforts that Sri Ramakrishna says, but think of God. That is the one thing that you have to achieve, having God, the human body, human life, so fortunate. Don't deviate from this opportunity of loving God. Now he says again, one must call on God with a longing heart. One must learn from the Guru how God can be realized. Only if the Guru himself has attained perfect knowledge can he show the way. So here Sri Ramakrishna says that follow the instruction of your Guru. And what type of Guru? The Guru who has realized the truth, who has attained the perfect knowledge. Only when one has realized the truth, he or she can guide another person to the truth. If that person has himself or herself has not reached the goal, what can he or she guide? So when such a person of God realization is there, and that becomes your Guru, then whatever Guru has instructed, follow that and you will reach there. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that one must, if the Guru himself has attained perfect knowledge, can he show the way? One must learn from the Guru how God can be realized. So for us, we say Guru Maharaj. For us, our Guru is Sri Ramakrishna. We don't have to depend on any other human Guru. We can ask the question, ask the thing, they will instruct us to do japam, or they may guide us sometime what we should do and what we should not do, get rid of little problem. They will try to solve our problems of sadhana or anything we can share with them. But the real instruction for how to love God has to come from Guru Maharaj, from Sri Ramakrishna. There is everything the Sri Ramakrishna has guided us. His gospel is nothing but the guidance of Guru to us, because our Guru is Sri Ramakrishna. So we have the Guru who has realized God, who is the devotee of God, who is the embodiment of God. So if He guides us, if we accept His guidance, if we do what He instructs us, then we are surely to reach God. So it's in following the instruction, it is not only we follow the instruction, but when we start treading the path that our Guru Maharaj has said, then the power comes from Guru Maharaj. And we are pulled more and more towards God. More and more joy is felt in the heart, and more intense love for God grows. Not just by reading the book, but the blessing of God that comes. That's why he says figuratively that one devotee, aspirant, proceeds one step towards God, God comes 10 steps towards him or her. So that is the grace of God. When we start practicing sadhana, the sadhana first little difficult, then sadhana itself becomes enjoyable. Repeating the name of God becomes joyful, and then we go deeper and deeper. The love starts intensifying. Love for God starts intensifying, and our spiritual quality starts manifesting in our behavior, in our attitude, in our thought. We become more peaceful, more joyful, more happy, immune to the worldly surroundings and worldly the things that come from the world. We become immune to that. Insults or praise doesn't matter. The person is I like that or I dislike that. That also becomes less and less. Dislikes become less. You start liking everyone because you start seeing the truth in every being as God manifesting. So who cares whether someone praises you or not, someone is friendly to you or not? You are friendly to everyone. So that type of attitude comes whenever we grow in love for God. A man gets rid of all desires when he has perfect knowledge. He becomes like a child 5 years old. So that is the sign of a perfect knowledge. So how we can understand that we are progressing towards God? So have we got the perfect knowledge? Perfect knowledge is becomes like 5-year-old child. So why child is so much described about for a perfected person? The child is not under any bound by any desires, not so much caught that I have to get that. Doesn't happen for the child. If he wants something, it's very temporary. He just wants. You can divert that. So the great sage, realized soul, may want something. He may say, give me this, I want to drink, I want to eat. But if it's just for the temporary, for the time being, you can easily divert. His mind easily goes away from that desire and goes back to God. Like that is the child. Child has a feeling of goodness towards all. He doesn't divide the world into liking and disliking. He likes everything in the world. He sees everything as filled with consciousness or filled with life. Everything seems to be full of life. Sri Ramakrishna says of Shivu when he was a 5-year-old, and he says he was seeing the lightning in these clouds during rainy season, and says, Uncle, see that God is sparking the flint. There's a stone, flint stone is there, which when you rub or when you strike, it spark comes out. God is doing that. So that also seemed to be like God's action for that person. The leaf was moving and said, "Hish, don't move." It's as if the leaf is moving by itself. I want to catch this butterfly or something, you would say. So like that for a small child, everything is just filled with consciousness. Everything is living for that being. Only sages like Dattatreya and Jadabharata had the nature of a child. So he gives the example of two great jnanis. Because perfect knowledge comes, he didn't give the example of Bharata, and he didn't give the example of Prahlada and Dhruva. Those are most common examples of devotees. He's talking more about perfect knowledge. And there's no difference between perfect knowledge and perfect devotion. It's the same thing. But he gives the example from who are perfected in knowledge, Jada Bharata and Dattatreya, who are established in Advaita. He brings the example of these two, because Dhruva and Prahlada they themselves were child, whereas this Dattatreya and Jada Bharata were grown up, and yet they were like child, unbound by any praise or blame. So much they will be scolding. Used to get our Jada Bharata. He never mind anything. He didn't mind at all who is scolding and what. So he was always in the bliss of the self. That is the thing. And same was Dattatreya. So they had the nature of the child. That's what he says about the perfect knowledge. M asks now. M. One hears about them, but there were many others like them that the world doesn't hear about. And that is so true. So there were not what Yam wants to say to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna will approve this, that it is not only one or two persons were there in the whole history of spiritual practice, that those who had attained the perfect knowledge and had attained that type of behavior like a 5-year-old child. Only two are more elaborated, are written in the scriptures, but there were many who were not noticed by the society, and yet they were there, they lived the life, they realized God, they were perfected. There have been in every age. That's what Swami Vivekananda came to the Chicago and said, there have been perfect persons in every age, in every religion. If one religion thinks that only we have the perfect, only we have the process to realize the truth, so I pity that person from the bottom of my heart. So every religion, every faith, every country and every age, there are many people who have realized God. Even today, there are people who have realized God. So that's what Yam wants to wants to take the approval of Sri Ramakrishna, wants to take his opinion. He knows that he must have heard this from Sri Ramakrishna himself, or he must have thought this, that there are many God-realized persons in the world. We know only a few of them, like iceberg. Master, yes, he approves that. The Jnani gets rid of all desire. Now he's more or saying that what is the Jnani, what is the perfected man of perfect knowledge. The Jnani gets rid of all desires. If any is left, it does not hurt him. At the touch of a philosopher's stone, the sword is transferred into gold. So, the who is perfected has to get rid of all knowledge, and then that person becomes perfected. Close to perfection, some desires might be there. After the perfected soul comes back to the worldly thing, there might be some desires, but those just seem to be desires, as I told, that do not bind those people. Desire for the moment, I want to drink tea. If he gets or she gets tea, it's fine. If she or he doesn't get tea, that also doesn't matter. He will or she will forget in a moment about his desire for tea. So because he dwells in God, so like this it happens. He may have a few desires, but they do not hurt the person. At the touch, and he says, at the touch of the philosopher's stone, the sword is transformed into gold. The man has become perfected with knowledge. He or she has attained perfect knowledge. And then he has been or she has been totally transformed. He may look like same, he may speak the same language, he may eat the same food, he may dwell in the same house, but the person has totally transformed. Siddhartha goes and into Samadhi, attains Nirvana, and comes out Gautama, the Buddha. The Buddha comes out. But the Siddhartha and Buddha external appearance, no difference. But the sword made of iron had become now sword of gold. Now it's very valuable. He has attained the right thing, what human beings should strive to attain. Then that sword cannot do any killing. Just so, the jnani keeps only a semblance of anger and passion. They are anger and passion only in name and cannot injure him. So that thing that the jnani, what we see like the desire of a person of knowledge, that is only for, it looks like as if he has desire. Swami Brahmananda used to go to catch fish, as if he was interested in catching fish. Not at all. He used to put that angle in the water, and he had to forget himself about that. So like that, as if he was indulged in the worldly things, sometimes merry-making, sometimes this, but that was only for that moment, temporary. Otherwise, mind was always engrossed in God alone. That is how the God-realized person, the perfect person of perfect knowledge, that they dwell in the world. They look like that, but they are very different. Their desires are very thin, very light, and very temporary. Those desires don't hurt them. And the passion, it looks like passion, but there is no that type of passion for themselves. That is for the great knower of Brahman. What about then the rishis? We hear about Durvasa. We hear about Durvasa, that was a rishi, and yet he used to become so angry and used to curse people, and that curse used to translate into action, it would happen. So what about such type of rishi? Sri Ramakrishna says here about the God-realized person, don't harm anyone, that curse doesn't harm. One thing we have to remember, that when the curse comes from rishi like Durvasa, who is a God-realized person, that is also for our good. Something good will happen because of that curse. So there is glory in that. Though it will seem like we are in trouble, but that will be ultimately our good. That is there. So their anger is also for our good. If God-realized person does something to us, with his seeming anger, he is doing our good. So that is about the anger of some rishis. It happens that way. That is for our good. Every action you will see is that happens. Otherwise, if it is really they were angry and curse you, and then because they have so psychic power, they have a realized person, whatever they speak will become translated into the thing what they say, because their words are always true, they cannot become false. So it happens that way. But that is not the real curse they do. They don't have any hatred for the person even after saying something like that. So often people mistake. I went to the ashram, I was just by mistake, I was climbing the stairs with slippers on. One Swami came and became so angry on me. He said, "What are you doing? Can't you say? Why are you taking slippers in the temple? Can't you leave it out down below the stairs?" And why Swami would become like angry? Some often we get a very negative feeling about the monk. I have seen that Swami speaks so nice, and that other Swami, when I went, he used to give some prasad to eat. But this Swami is so angry. What type of Swami is that? But Swami is not angry upon you. Swami was angry upon your action of taking slippers, climbing the steps of the temple with the slippers on, which was not the rule. So just keep the slippers down. He has no hatred for you, he has no anger for you, but he doesn't approve your taking the slippers. Your mistake, he just said boldly, don't commit this mistake. Sri Ram, there is the temple, deity is there. For the reverence of the deity, we don't take slippers to the temple, we keep it down below the stairs. So do that. Just he said, forcefully. There was no anger at all. Because we have anger in our heart and we see anger everywhere in the world, that's why we feel that that sadhu had also become angry. If that sadhu had become angry, he would be always angry with you. If you put down the slippers and says, Maharaj, sorry, he is the same thing. Oh, okay, don't mind. That will be his thing. He is not angry at all. That's why they say, sadhur rag joler dag. The sadhu's anger is like the water, and you get the stain, like the water. You get water on a cloth, and it seems as if something has fallen on the cloth. It has changed the color. But after some time, that the water evaporates and the cloth is same. So there is no real stain on the cloth. So sadhur rag joler dag. The anger of a monk is like the stain of water. So there is no real anger in the monk. So that we have to understand. Now, here it says, they are anger and passion only in name and cannot injure him. So the anger doesn't injure other person. When we are angry on someone else, that person becomes very upset and offended, and really he feels bad, she feels bad. She feels she is harmed by you through your words. She is harmed, injured by your words. But who gets greater injury? Yourself, who is angry, who speaks the words without thinking, who injures other by words. That person is harmed more. This anger and passions harm more the person who have these anger and passion. So, but for the sadhu, it is not that they don't harm them at all. Neither they harm the person, nor they harm the devotee, if the devotee knows that it is just for my action. He was a little said loudly, forcefully, but he is not angry. Sadhus don't become angry on the devotee. He may show anger through their forceful words for the action that the devotee might have done. Action was little wrong, so on that he said that way. Now, Yam says, yes sir, the jnani goes beyond the three gunas, as you say. He is not under the control of any of the gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. All these three are so many robbers, as it were. Where did Yam know this thing? He knew from Sri Ramakrishna himself, and he said that for the devotee, real lover of God, goes beyond all the gunas. Sattva is the serenity, peace, joy. Even beyond that, there is the ecstasy, which is beyond joy. So, and the rajas, passion, doing work, engrossed in getting something, and tamas, lethargy, misunderstanding, and dullness. All those things, those are all different gunas that bind us. The devotee goes beyond all those binding power of those gunas, so that those do not bind that person. And Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, one must assimilate that. Only talking will not happen. What is going beyond the gunas, we have to think, and we have to practice to go beyond the guna, not being bound by this rajas which binds us, by tamas which binds us. If we conquer tamas, then rajas, and if we conquer rajas, then sattva is also binding, but sattva is it's not binds. If we remain in sattva, then it binds us. But sattva helps us to go beyond sattva itself. It is like a boat that takes us across on the river from this bank to that bank. Now after you reach the bank, if you say, oh, this boat has been so helpful and it really makes me cross, I don't want to leave this boat, then how will you go to a village? You are caught by the sattva. This sattva is like that guna. So one has to transcend sattva also. No need to try to transcend. Sattva will be transcended if we try to live sattva, and like the serenity, peace, love, kindness, compassion. All these are the signs of sattva, regularity, austerity. These are all signs of sattva. So if we dwell on sattva, sattva itself will leave us and we will transcend, we will go beyond even sattva and we will be in the ecstasy of God, that mad in the love of God, that is going beyond all gunas. There is no guna in madness for God. So you transcend all the three gunas. You are always in the ecstasy of God. Sri Ramakrishna said very important hints how we can develop more and more love for God. So they say grow more crop. The spiritual teachers, they say grow more love for God. That is the thing. So how will it come? I can do nothing. I have nothing. If God gives, then He will come. No, that way God, you will not get from God. God is always giving. You are not holding. You have to make yourself fit to hold the grace of God. For that you start walking. You start walking, you find then some pull is coming. So first it is difficult. When you run a car, it's always in the first gear. Go slow, a lot of power is needed. But when it picks up power, you go to the second gear. Then it's easier, more smoother speed it comes. So like that, when you start in the spiritual life, it will struggle is there. So repeating name, sitting for the prayer time regularly in the morning, mind diverted here and there, trying to bring it to our Ishta, all takes a lot of effort. If we go on doing that, effort becomes less and less. It becomes easier, as if we are trying to move forward, and then we find someone is pulling us towards, God is then pulling us towards Himself, then walking becomes much easier, much faster, much smoother. All this struggles becomes less. That is how the sadhanas happen. If we do not practice sadhana, it will be very difficult. This sadhana for everything. If we do practice sadhana, then the course becomes easier, joyful. That happens in studies also. When you study in the beginning, everything seems to be so difficult. But as we go on studying, little put the mind and bring all our thoughts in our study curriculum problem, then difficulty doesn't come out. Then it starts coming. Next problem, easier coming. Other problem, easier coming. Like that we start growing. Then we will start enjoying problems, solving the problems of your curriculum, and your progress is faster, as if God is making everything clear to you. Your effort, definitely God's grace works when you put your more effort there. That is so for our spiritual practice also. Thank you very much for attending today's Friday's class, and on Sunday we have Buddha Jayanti celebration at 11 a.m. on YouTube. Please join the Buddha Jayanti and offer your adoration to one of the greatest teachers of mankind, who was born more than 2,500 years, whose teachings are so relevant even today. And there are so many of followers, and those who have really followed Buddha have changed their life from the sword of iron to sword of gold. They have become really followed Buddha's life. So that power that Buddha had to change the iron into gold, that Midas power he had. The philosopher's stone he is. So let us adore Buddha, one of the greatest teacher of mankind. So much loved by Swami Vivekananda. We had the vision of Buddha. Even Swami Vivekananda is said to be Buddha-like. Many people thought he is Buddha. So in Swami Vivekananda we see the heart of Buddha and the intellect of Shankara. That's what we say. So let us meet at 11 o'clock on YouTube on May 30th. Now the closing chants. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padpadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Murmuhu. Thank you. Thank you and good night.